also I will be skipping through some demos and show something live. So if you have any questions and want me to click on anything, just raise your hand or interrupt me. I don't care much about that. So a bit about me. I'm Enrico. I'm working at a systems integrator here in Germany, and yeah, we're based in things like data centers that we built with our customers for the last 20 years, and now new workloads kick in, like Kubernetes, like cloud native, like anything software development related, and that always brings up one question, not just to us, but also to our customers, is how do we learn those new technologies? How can we try it out without breaking things in production? And that's something that we had to answer many times. So we do a lot of trainings internally to get our staff on board with new technologies. We do lots of hackathons to try things out and see how those work, what those could do for us and stuff like that. And also for us as consultants at a systems integrator, we go to customers, we implement things, and we need to train the people which later on work with the solutions that we implement there. So that brings many issues in how to do training. So question to you all, who does trainings in the Kubernetes space? Okay, so how do you do it? Which tooling? Just throw some birds. What?
Online platforms.
Online platforms, so like Katacoda or something like this. Yeah. GKE cluster with Google Cloud Console. Yeah, works right. The thing is, we did it kind of the same and same but different. And different means when you have a team of like, I don't know, 15 people doing trainings and everyone designing their own training material, their own like environments, how they do it, it's pretty hard to get this all to work. And we started out with on-site workshops that you probably know from before the pandemic, where we had rooms where people were in and where people could raise their hands and you see how fast they go or not. So that kind of changed. So we needed something new. And we started out with something that you probably know from the past, so Vagrant, bringing up virtual machines. And that worked well until we had people joining in with something like a Chromebook, and you can't run virtual machines on that anymore. And they stay there and say, okay, yeah, what do I do? How do I get those people on board? Maybe I can bring a notebook or two, or ask before which hardware they choose. So that was an issue. And we thought, okay, most of the trainings that we did, 3 years ago, 4 years ago, were around Docker. And we thought, isn't there something that you could use which brings Docker to you and lets you integrate that into a browser so that no one has to install things? And there was something. Something that was there is the Play with Docker playground. Anyone used that before? Okay, a few ones. So Play with Docker basically works like this. You get a web environment where we can have a session, and in that session you have a terminal. And what it technically does is you have like a container in a Swarm cluster, and then a container inside of that where you can have a Docker runtime, and then you can start containers. So it's containers and containers and containers. And that works well. And they also did something for workshops. It's on another website where they integrated together with these Docker containers on the right side. You can even have like multiple ones if you want to do things like Swarm. And on the left side, you have regular Markdown. Yeah, and the thing with that is also that has changed. So it served as well, but the main problem that we had with it is we had many pros and cons. So it starts pretty fast. It's working in a browser. Markdown is easy, and if you saw those marked lines like the uname -a, you can just click on it and it directly transfers into the terminal. So it's pretty easy to use and works pretty fast, because the only thing that a startup or that you do for starting that session is starting a container, and that's starting a process, and that's obviously pretty fast. Thing is, when you come in with Kubernetes as something that happened after Swarm, we needed something that does a bit more and even have like fully fledged virtual machines to not have like maybe containers in or Docker containers, which then run a Docker socket and then running Kubernetes inside of that Docker container. That didn't make sense and didn't work well, especially when it comes to clustering. So that was one problem. Another problem is, as I mentioned earlier, scaling up. Like having all that written down, having your play with Docker environment in Ansible playbooks on GitHub and things like that were quite handy for me, but whenever I try to convince someone else to take over a class from me, it was pretty hard because, they didn't understand the code that I wrote, and they were always fearing that they don't know the infrastructure good enough to trust it over a course of I don't know, 1 week with 2 or 20 attendees or something like this. So that was really a pain for us, and we thought about it, and we wanted to scale. We wanted to bring up more people as trainers without them needing to take care about all the environments. So we were looking out in the market. There are some. There's Katakoda. I think they got bought by O'Reilly, and since then the pricing was kind of a thing, and yeah, that didn't work out for us. Everything that we saw as ready platforms or platform as a service things were too expensive for us. So we were looking at things that guys at Rancher did, and that's called Hobbyfarm, and it basically looks like this. So they have you have like a login form that you can go into. You have an access code that lets you join into a course, and we adopted that. And yeah, I think we're having 4 developers more or less full time working on that platform together with the Rancher guys. So that for us is also something that we tried out, or it was kind of hard to convince management that we now go open source and do our trainings with open source tools and contribute in something like this. But it's really worth it. So yeah, I will just go ahead and show you how that thing looks and what it does. Maybe. Computer do things. You have to be praying to the demo gods, right? Just to make sure that everything works. So, okay, so that's what it looks like. The first thing that we had is we wanted to have some branding. So we brought up some features that you can replace those images here, have your custom logos, something like that. And for the user, it's just like adding, it says email address, but it's just a random string. We don't check that. And then you can just log in here. So I'm going to do this. For a user, I then have the courses that I can select, and I have the choice between starting them or printing them. Printing them was always a pain for us, because after a class, people asked, where are the handouts? Can we have PDFs from it? And we were generating PDFs from Markdown, and we kind of outsourced it and just said, okay, if you want to have a handout, just go on the print button, print it out, you will have anything that's needed in there. So that's one of the first features that we added. When you start that, then you will get a virtual machine assigned, and that gets created like instantly here. So we should probably see the cloud provider doing its thing. At the current point, that could be either Terraform deploying it for you, so it just expects that you have a cloud provider and credentials, and then you get a VM name and an internal, external IP in return, and that's basically it. So let's start it. That should mean that we're not switching windows, we're just switching tabs. Like here. So now it's ready, we can begin, and the thing that we see is, on the one hand, we have those those steps that you can click through with all your tutorials. And on the right side, you have like your terminal where you root and have access to your machine. All that gets tunneled to the through the backend. The front end is in Angular and TypeScript. Backend is all Go. So that does the authentication, SSH key creation, handling the SSH things. Also, like if you reload the page, you will stick on the same machine and stuff like that. I mentioned earlier that we did trainings in the past, so before the pandemic, in rooms together with people, and that changed a lot. So most of our trainings nowadays are online. So we hang out in a Zoom or Teams session together and tell the people some basics about the topic, and then switch into the lab versions so that they can follow through the content and make their experience. That brings up a thing that we needed, because in a room I would see if someone is ready, or I could just say raise your hands, or I don't know, do a post-it in somewhere, or I don't know, anything as a sign that they are ready. In the first days, we just told the people that they should write into the chat when they are ready, but yeah, waiting for chat messages isn't that fancy. So what we did is when we now go into the administration layer, then you will see that I have one active session. It's the user admin. He's in the lab demo 1, 2, 3, and on step 1. When I now follow the instructions, I will see that the progress bar should reload in a couple seconds, so that I know whether I have time for next coffee or not. Right. So and also the data from how long it took to complete a step is also stored in the platform to have analysis after giving those trainings, so that you can see, okay, do people have or need many times in one specific step? Is it too complicated? Do you have to split it up or something like this? That's something that happens here. Could be fancier, could be better, but we did it like this. As an easy fix. So the next thing is we wanted to have it like as much cost efficient as it could. So whenever a person decides to finish the session, or I mean, you can easily close it and nothing will happen until a timeout that you set as a trainer. But if you finish that, it will now go ahead and tell the Terraform provider this machine is ready and should die, and it's gone. Right? Interesting around that whole project, if we go a bit more into detail, I have to search for my terminal. It's somewhere, and hopefully it didn't disconnect, which it did. Sure it did. Okay, so all the resources, so Hobbyfarm itself doesn't have a database, because we thought it's running on Kubernetes, so why not using etcd as the database so that we don't have to care about it. So all the things that we store in it, the users, the virtual machines, the states of Terraform, the content, everything is stored in custom resource definitions in Kubernetes, so that it's easy to transfer even users or the content between different clusters. So when we now go into the demo again, and I will start a new virtual machine of that type again, that will show that there is a virtual machine which got created, and there is a pod of the Terraform controller. So there's a dynamic job where we can just directly see the Terraform output of what's running there. So we didn't build just a Kubernetes learning platform, which helps us to provide Kubernetes trainings to customers or to our staff. We even implemented it in Kubernetes, so that every single resource is a Kubernetes resource, and I like that thing a lot. So, yeah. What else can I show you? The other things that, from a content creator perspective, is everything that we do here is written in Markdown. We also have some differences in how we create the content. There's like easy beginner content where we have like just click through lessons and the people don't really understand much about what they're doing, but in the end they will see that if they do it right, that it works. And we then switched over to more complex labs and scenarios where we can tell people how it works and then switch over to giving some tasks to them, and if they need help, they can just click it open and see, okay, what can I do to actually fulfill those tasks or something like this. So that's something that we implemented, and from the things that you have as an admin, all is like an event. So a training is an event. And if you create that, you will start from giving it a name. And after giving it a name, you will give it an access code. The access code is something that you give to your users at the start of the training, and then they have access to the specific scenarios or courses that you assign to them. There's a difference. I mean, you can switch on if it's printable, and it's also a configurable if it's on demand or not. That means if you're planning a session with, let's say, 500 students, then it may make sense to provision those virtual machines that you need for them before and not on demand. But if you issue like an access code to someone that does the learning over a period of 2 months or something like this, it doesn't make sense that the virtual machine runs all the time. So it's configurable whether it's on demand or not. Then you can specify how long this access code should last. You have courses. Courses are a bundle of different scenarios, and in those scenarios you have like the description. Then you can say on which cloud provider, in which region or whatever should this be hosted. In the dev environment, I just have Hetzner here, and you can say what's the limit of users that you have there. And that's basically it for the trainers now. So they don't have to take care about configuring all this and rolling out their own development environments for their training. They could just use the platform and tell people, just log in, use the access code, and you're done. Content-wise, everything is written in Markdown, and we enhanced this a bit because of those click-to-run and those hidden fields and stuff like that. So when we go into it, it's just steps. In those steps, you have a Markdown editor. You have some explanation about how you get to templated values like the IP address of a virtual machine if you want to let the user click on a link that exposes like a web service or something like this, or how you do like the glossary elements or click-to-runs, and all that is described in here. And if I want to edit this, and that makes content creation a lot easier, if I just go ahead and say I want to go with my demo environment here, and let me hit cancel so that it gets faster. So if I now want to elaborate something, or maybe one of my students says, okay, there's a typo in there, I can just go ahead and go into the according step and just edit it, and can say hello CDS 2020. And once the user reloads, it's like directly there. And that's how I basically write those trainings. I'm just going there, starting an empty lab, then having my virtual machine, try to figure out what I need to accomplish this task, and then just write it down in Markdown. So that speeds up also the process in how we do those trainings. So, as I mentioned earlier, or is there anything I should show or that you wanted to see before I go into the slides again? Okay, so what's next? We started out with this as a platform for Kubernetes and for containers, which helped us a lot. But now, as a company, we have like 2,600 employees, and there are other groups in our company that also do trainings on Git, on TypeScript, on Go, on some random IBM-related stuff, and they have different needs than we actually have. One need was that there's maybe more than just Linux. So that happens also. I don't know why. Is anyone using Windows containers? So like the Windows containers? Yeah, I thought so. But in the crowd out there, people kind of use it. So we thought it might be a good idea to integrate also with Windows. So the thing that we did here is, on the one hand, you can have multiple nodes on there, right? And then we integrated with Guacamole, which is like an HTML5 terminal or RDP emulation thingy. So we create Windows machines, we enhance the CRD so that it can handle not just SSH, but also VNC and RDP. And yeah, the folks can now use it also to have Windows. It has some limitations. It works best in Chrome, and yeah, if you slide the part from the tutorial and the window, it doesn't resize and stuff like that, but if you reload, it does. So it has some limitations, but it works. Another feature that we are currently working on is what about giving trainings to developers? And the easiest thing that we came up with is, why not just integrating Visual Studio Code as code server inside of that terminal window, so that you can just do like, yeah, just start VS Code, and then people can, yeah, maybe have their trainings about coding and yeah, something related that needs a development environment, and that also makes it easier for them to not tell the people, you will need that IDE with those 20 plugins configured like this. So they can just start having their own templates and yeah, do the stuff they needed in there. Something that I wanted to tell you guys is that whole thing, that's open source. You can just go to GitHub /Hobbyfarm. You will find it there. Also, all the issues and improvements that we wanted to have there are there. And you can use it, you can contribute it. If you have questions about it, just go ahead and ask me. I will be at the NetApp booth, like the guys before, with the blinking cluster. So if you're interested in using that open source project, feel free. And yeah, I would be happy to see some new contributors in there to help this project get bigger. Thanks.
Cool, thanks. Thanks, Enrico. Really cool project. I'll definitely test it out. We do have a few questions before you all go to lunch. Yeah, of course, it's just Markdown and Shell, so can you somehow check whether the user did something correct?
Yeah, that's a use case that we had also, and we thought about quizzes, which we didn't do yet, so it's a feature request, and one of our guys is working on it, and we thought about issuing commands to the virtual machine, which we could do over the shell server, and then have a regex sitting in there to check whether the output is the expected one. So we're working on that. That gets a bit hard if you talk about Windows, because, I mean, checking things on a Windows server probably might go somewhere, but yeah, for Linux, we are working on it. Probably comes over the next releases.
Cool. K9S question, why does your terminal show the shortcut K9S?
Yeah, it's the development instance, but yeah, it's okay. Go ahead, try it out. It's admin, so.
Yeah, and K9S. Yeah, why does your terminal show the shortcut K9S? You put in K9S.
Yeah.
So it's got to do with Kubernetes, but it's not a Kubernetes tool.
Yeah, the thing is, I like this terminal emulation software a lot. You have, can we switch to the monitor again somehow?
Yep.
Hopefully. So where was it? I think it was here. So K9S is a terminal application that lets you, when we have it.
Yep.
Yeah, lets you scroll through all the resources that we have, and if you type the, what is it, double dot, the things over the dot, then you can just search for other resources. You can even search for CRDs and scroll through your CRDs, or with / you can search for them, and yeah, it makes Kubernetes handier if you prefer the terminal, so that saves you lots of kubectl commands. Definitely check that out, K9S.
Cool. How can you define what resources are being created?
So the virtual machines are basically templates, and the templates then get mapped into the Terraform controller, and the Terraform controller has then the capability of rolling out different types of instances. So you define a virtual machine template. That template contains the size, maybe the image, or the region, stuff like that, and then all that gets merged together and gets thrown at Terraform or at a specific controller that we have for, I think it's for droplets are from DigitalOcean, I believe.
DigitalOcean, yeah.
Yeah, DO is in there. We have GCP, we have an AWS controller, but we're working most of the times with Terraform because it's supporting even more cloud providers.
Cool. And last question, I'll leave the K9S for chat during lunch. Are there public instances everybody can use?
Nope, not yet. Or I mean, those technically those instances are public. It's not a software as a service platform that we monetize in some way. But the only thing that you need to run it is a 4-core or 2-core virtual machine with Kubernetes. Could be K3s with, I would suggest something around 4 to 8 gigs of RAM. So that's everything you need. It's a Helm chart deployment that's described in the GitHub repository, and you're done. The first things is preceding that environment so that it works for the first time is a bit tricky, but I would encourage you to just reach out over Slack or email or whatever. Do a pull request, do an issue. Some of this is documented, but maybe developers are, or at least our developers, and me personally, I'm worse at documenting. It's yeah.
Cool, awesome. Thanks, Enrico. Cool name tag as well.
Thanks.
Thank you.